It's the Elizabeth Albano Show on WCGO Radio. We are live, and of course, we're being safe, so we're doing it remotely. Colleen Patrick-Goudreau joins me from Oakland, California. She is the author of The Joyful Vegan, and she's here with me. During the break, we were talking about the responsibilities of large-scale corporations, Cargill, JBS, Maple Leaf, to really Smithfield, to really get out ahead. They have plant-based products, they have distribution lines, they have huge advertising budgets, and I call on them to push their plant-based products because they know that eating animals has been a source of epidemics, and not just this one, and they could really continue to make money and push the world in a better place. Colleen, are you with me?
I am.
Great. That's wonderful. Well, so let's move on a little bit to your book. There's only so much the world can talk about coronavirus, although we won't stop here on this channel. I wanted to ask you, why did you decide to write The Joyful Vegan?
I wrote The Joyful Vegan because I have been hearing from people for, I almost said hundreds of years, I'm thinking of coronavirus, for decades, I can say that. As I have been podcasting for this long, I have several books. I've been guiding people to becoming vegan and staying vegan for that long. And I have been hearing from people for that many years who have written to me with their struggles and with their challenges, and not just not staying vegan, but not remaining joyful and not feeling like they fit in, not feeling like they have a place, not feeling like they have peace in their communities, in their lives, among their family members, among their friends, the pushback that we get, the defensiveness that they experience, et cetera. And so it just started becoming clear to me that obviously there are guidance that we have to give to people as they're transitioning from non-vegan to vegan. But people also need guidance in terms of staying vegan because the journey doesn't end once you become vegan. It really is another journey that begins.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I wrote this book, to really address a lot of these different challenges that people have.
And so what's the biggest hurdle for people? Because I often hear, maybe we should take a step back. If you could define the difference, please, for people, the difference between being vegan and being plant-based.
Well, I think right now, people are calling themselves different things depending on what makes sense for them. I think that for me, the main line is that people who call themselves vegan, really, again, not everybody knows the line. So it's not like there's anybody mandating that they have to call themselves one or the other. But typically, when you're vegan, you're just not eating animal products, but you're also then becoming more aware of the violence against animals in leather, in wool, and all these other things. But it's not that like people who are plant-based don't have that awareness as well. It's just that if they decide to just do it for health reasons, typically is what that means. That might be where they stop and they don't, change out their clothing and they change out the leather and the wool and the cashmere, et cetera. But really, honestly, I think there's some interchangeability, and I think there's a lot of data around what makes sense in terms of how we call ourselves, how we talk about food, what labels go on food, because there is evidence that putting vegan on a product or a menu item is less likely to get a non-vegan to order it, whereas if you put meat-free or plant-based, it might get someone to order it. So there's lots to talk about related to the language, but that's typically what the difference might be.
I've been using the term no animal products because I think sometimes people desensitize themselves and they say, oh, no meat. And as I did before, no meat. But I really want people to make that connection that meat is animals. And most of us, the majority of us, really love animals. We say that we love animals, and it's a huge disconnect to love animals and to eat them. I know for me, when I went vegan, I sort of thought, okay, I'm going to shed some weight. That's great. And I did a little bit of that, which was wonderful. And I thought, I didn't expect that I'd feel so much better, that I'd get an extra boost of energy, which was wonderful. But the biggest change for me was I didn't realize the burden that I had been carrying around with me when my actions were not aligning with my personal values. And I have never valued not being kind to animals. Being kind to animals is very important to me, just like all sentient beings. And my life was at a disconnect with that. And I hadn't realized the weight that I was carrying living that disconnect. And when I was no longer disconnected from myself and my beliefs and my priorities, a huge weight was lifted. And I wonder if any of your clients or the people that you guide ever talk about that.
Oh, for sure. So I talk about the stages that we go through once we stop eating animal products. And so the first stage is bearing witness and kind of being aware of everything that, that is happening both in terms of the animals, but also our health. But prior to that, the awakening stage is the moment when we have that epiphany. And that is what so many people will talk about. I mean, it's the first stage of bearing witness, but it really is like, how could I not have known this? How could this be happening? Because we are just blinded to the realities of the detrimental effects of animal products, both on our health and, of course, to the animals.
And the environment.
And so, exactly. And so it literally is an awakening for most people. And so, yes, I talk about that in the book, specifically that this is an epiphany, that most people would characterize it as an epiphany.
Well, then I'm sort of surprised because in spending some time with your book, thank you very much. And I can see it in the upper left-hand corner there, which is great, The Joyful Vegan. It's out now on Amazon.com. I was surprised that you said a lot of people don't stay vegan. And I would think, you have that epiphany, you'd never want to go back.
Yeah, you know what? The thing is that for all of our desire to do the right thing, we're also social creatures. Mm-hmm. And that is where a lot of people struggle. And again, that doesn't mean they necessarily stop being vegan, but they also feel isolated, and it doesn't feel very good. And when you identify that the thing that makes you not feel good, or that disconnects you from everybody else, is that you're vegan, then you're going to either stop doing the thing that you think is the cause, or you're going to get better at that engagement and those interactions and those relationships. And so we're social creatures through and through. And I think our need to belong, we really underestimate that. And that is, I think, what's happening when people struggle staying vegan, because we're social creatures.
And how do you counsel people to get through that period of maybe feeling slightly socially ostracized? Although I will say I see that as being less and less the case, as there are more and more plant-based products out there, more and more, even commercials during Super Bowls. So I see that as less and less the case. But, for certainly some people, particularly depending on where you live, it's still the case. And how do you counsel people to kind of get through that?
Well, first of all, I think we just have to understand that it's difficult for people when we change. We are a known quantity in our relationships. Our parents have known us this way. Our friends have known us this way. Our lovers have known us this way. If we interact with them through food a lot, that's going to change things. So I think the first thing is to understand that it is a challenge, that it is going to be an adjustment. It's going to be a transition. And we have to just understand that that's why they're acting the way they are. And so it's not personal. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of fear. And there's also a lot of fear that, and a perception that being vegan is antithetical to your other identities. So gender identity, cultural identity, religious identity, family identity, all of these things. And so if they think that you being vegan is now a threat to those other identities, that's going to also cause some friction. So just knowing that, and so what do? You make sure they understand that this is not a challenge to them. It's not a challenge against what they, the other identities, that it's actually more in keeping, in alignment with those identities. Mm-hmm. So that is the first thing, is just kind of awareness and understanding. And then, there's a lot to learn about communication, understanding, and how we position it, how other people are going to take it. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of relationships and communication.
Yes, this is why I recommend the book Joyful Vegan, because if you're thinking about being vegan, making the switch over to plant-based for your health, for the environment, for animals, this book can really help you guide you through that process, because of course you want it to be a success. You want to lose that weight, you want better cholesterol numbers with your doctor, you want to be kind to the environment, because most likely you have children, or if you are young and don't have children yet, you want to be around for a planet that lasts. So I highly recommend getting this book. And I'll say that for me as a Sicilian, and also, I'll recommend your recipes, Colleen, hit up my website, ElizabethAlfano.com, because the best way to put people at ease is to feed them with something good. And Colleen has a bunch of recipes. You have other books like the Joyful Vegan Baking book. And, both of us have Kickstarter programs. You have a beautiful 30-day Kickstarter program. So food. I can't recommend recipes enough for just bringing joy and having people feel good about what they're eating and being satiated. Okay, so let's get into a couple of, where you see the world going. What kind of predictions do you have for us as we are in an epidemic and at the same time people had already opened their eyes and the food technology was there and the businesses are starting to come and put their dollars behind it? Where do you see us going? And that can be next week or the next 10 years.
Oh, I am a consummate optimist, and I think that we are moving in the right direction. Of course, it's a huge issue, our exploitation of other animals in many different ways. But I am an optimist, and whatever the motivation is for people to individually make changes, or for companies to make changes, or for governments to make changes, I don't care. And this is how change often happens, is that there's usually some kind of, unfortunately, some kind of large scale event. And again, like I said, I mean, conservatiors have been trying to work on the wildlife trafficking issue for decades, and SARS kind of slowed it down in China after the SARS outbreak, but the wildlife trafficking went back up after that. And so here we are again. And so we have to, unfortunately, as humans, we're very slow to learn. And we have to, unfortunately, see a lot of suffering before we make changes. But we do make changes. And so I'm very hopeful. I am very hopeful about regarding plant-based meats and plant-based products. I'm really encouraged by clean meat. I think that's a direction we're going in. I think people, as long as if they're going to get the fat and the salt and the taste and the texture and the familiarity, they're not going to care where it's coming from. I mean, we already have that in plants. So I really do encourage people to eat plants because we already have alternatives to animal meat, which is plants. So let's do that. But yeah.
It's my time with you, of course, is so short. Gosh darn it. We have just under a minute. But I want to ask you, please make the distinction, people. Do you see any difference between animals in farms and pets?
Oh, you're asking me if I see a difference between having dogs and cats and having animals on farms?
Yes.
Yes.
The emotion. Okay, we have about 30 seconds, but just the emotional reaction of cows to dogs. I think people say like, oh, well, they were eating some weird bat, so that's why we have an epidemic. But bats are cows, our dogs are chickens. Chickens was what gave us SARS. So there's no difference, people. I'm taking the words out of your mouth only because we don't have time, but there's no difference, people. The Joyful Vegan. How I love having Colleen with me. We're going to do this again when you're in LA because this remote stuff, I'd love to have you with me. Colleen Patrick-Goudreau, the Joyful Vegan, everybody, go get it.